who is responsible? Who faces the damage? Who faces damages? Who is actually going to be held accountable? Recently, there was an incident of a young 14-year-old boy. His best friend was a AI-generated chatbot. He committed suicide based on his conversation with the chatbot. Who should be held liable? Is it the company which created the chatbot? Who exactly is accountable? So, Mahesh, just point us through some of these issues.
Very good points, Chandu. I think the first part of it is what is called prompt engineering. And if you are old enough to remember the Tamil movie called Thiruvilayadal, there used to be a dialogue between Nagesh and Shivaji. And Nagesh used to say, I only know how to ask questions. And now if he is alive, he would actually be called a prompt engineer because that's what the most important skill is. Today, if you actually go to Coursera or Udemy, you will find very interesting courses. I would encourage you if you have not actually done that. And Coursera is of course free unless you want a certificate about prompt engineering. I will deeply encourage you to do it because the answer from any of these LLM models, including ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc., the answer you get highly depends on how you phrase the question. So if you phrase the question more specifically, more accurate, then the answer that it generates will be more appropriate. And the broader the questions, the very vague the answer is. And also, I think Chandu touched upon topic on some of the governance issues related to the AI. And one of the challenges in AI is something called hallucination. And I don't know what kind of weed it smokes, but it can give you answers which it doesn't exist because it does actually generate a content. If you ask it to generate a content for a movie, it might do, but it will also generate a fictitious reply to a question that you are asking. So be wary of this. I think there are multiple risks in the governance side of AI. Data privacy is one big risk and AI bias. And that was also highlighted in Chandu's example. And there is going to be job displacement. How do we actually manage that? And there is going to be issues related to transparency, how the decision was taken, and accountability. Who is held responsible, as Chandu is rightly asking. There are many parameters. I think it's a big topic, but in ISACA, the organization that actually brings in governance in many of these things, I had a discussion. And one of the most important things is to build the AI framework that has ethical things built into it. And it will not actually give an answer that is incorrect or has been hallucinating or is very much biased. And the other thing is, if you are building an AI strategy, it must align with the business strategy. Otherwise, it doesn't actually make sense to just build that for the sake of technology. And transparency, which is how did it arrive at this decision. So explainable AI is one of the important things that is coming up now. And there is the ChatGPT, which has come up with a new version where it will explain the decision it took and why it took what it took. The accountability in short lies, for example, I'll take a simpler example. A bank is actually denied a loan to a person because the person who applied for a loan had incorrect information in the database. It is going to be enforced that the bank will need to give explanation if it is being taken through an AI system as to why that loan was denied. And now it is becoming a black box now. Or another example is if someone is applying for a job and they are denied the interview, the ethical framework they are going to bring in, and there are ISO frameworks, which I'm not getting into the detail of it, which is going to say the reason why somebody is getting rejected at that stage has to be explained, especially if an AI is taking the decision to shortlist. In short, governance helps your AI from going rogue while helping you leverage it for strategic success. I think important to visualize this as a proper seat belt that you have in a car. You need to have a seat belt in a car that in case of something happens, you are actually protected, but it cannot actually stifle innovation. That's the other aspect of the governance that we need to take into consideration. But the questions are very important, Chandu. There are frameworks that are coming up and there are going to be laws that are enacted here.
Okay, now so far we've been, when we talk about technology, everybody looks only at digital software, AI kind of thing. But are there other industries where there has been a tremendous change because of the impact of new technological innovations? Can you walk us through one or two industries there, both which are very tech and infrastructure heavy and those which are not so tech heavy in the past?
Absolutely. I think let's take an example outside of some of this. I will actually start with some examples that we are very familiar with. If we actually take a well-known example in the industry like electric vehicle, we can actually see how the adoption of EV was made popular by Tesla. And similarly, there has been examples of other things that we see, which is like precision agriculture and also AI application in dairy. And this is not actually just for the AI sake, but it is more to do with how we actually look at the mainstream industry getting adoption of the technology, but for the greater good on things like agriculture, it could be for dairy farming. And there's a mixture of the information like the sensors that are actually put on the cattle, there are information that are collected, and this combined thing is actually bringing in a fantastic result out of technology. There's a company called in IIT incubated company, Stellabs. It is using IoT wearables and data analytics to improve milk production. I can go on and on. I think for the sake of time, I will probably confine myself here, but probably wait for other questions to come. And one more thing which I wanted to say is on the, if I may, Chandu,
please go ahead,
is on the adoption of what is now called the ONDC, which are something the Indian government has been promoting. If you don't know what ONDC is, it stands for Open Network for Digital Commerce. It's a fascinating thing. So think of online marketplace like Amazon, etc. But instead of Amazons of the world becoming bigger and bigger, the government of India has put a framework called ONDC, which is now going to make it possible for small SMEs to also participate in the marketplace. And it's going to be a game changer for many of the small, medium companies to participate. It's not technology per se, but it's a framework for adoption of a marketplace by a lot of companies, including the Kirana stores and small retailers, to go digital. These are all part of what we call as the digital public infrastructure, and this can create a level playing field for empowering small businesses with the same tools as giants.
Thank you, Mahesh. Just to follow on from what Mahesh said about Stellabs, I understand that even Arun Ice Cream, Ibaco specifically, they found that apparently 30% sometimes of ice creams get melted because of lack of proper temperature maintenance. So in order to ensure the right temperature in the freezer, they actually worked with a company I think called Nimble Wireless out of Chennai to make sure that the temperature even through the night is maintained at a particular thing, so that ice cream, if you know, if it unfreezes and refreezes, it no longer tastes like ice cream. It tastes like some lump and mass. So even at a very ordinary level, the next time you're having a softy cone, please remember that there's a lot of technology which ensures that you get a very soft ice cream. Now, one of the industries which impacts us, which seems to have a lot of technology, but you haven't talked about it, is healthcare. Mm-hmm. And there's so many things happening there. Can you just tell us what exactly is one of the largest industries in the US? The healthcare business is bigger than India's GDP. So what exactly is happening there?
Great question, Chandu. I think some of you might have actually seen that the Arvind Eye Care, which is one of the largest not-for-profit organization, which does a lot of cataract surgery, they have millions of the information about patient's eye, and they have actually taken that information and done a regression test, and which was used by Google to do a correlation analysis from the retina scan, which actually now diagnoses things like cancer. Does this person have a propensity to get cancer? But it can also say with 80% accuracy whether the person is a male or female, what age that person could potentially be. So just from a retina scan, it is going to be possible for the technology to be able to diagnose a lot of other illnesses. This is another example of how the healthcare industry is getting very much disrupted. And this is possible because the millions of regressions that technology can actually run and the machine learning that it can come up with. Another example is the telemedicine in AI and healthcare. There's a company called Curie.ai. This company, for example, analyzes medical images, aids diagnosis, and it can actually provide a lot of information about the detection and the early detection of lung cancer, tuberculosis, etc. You can actually check it out. What is going to be interesting is when this is actually coming up more and more, you would actually see a very interesting twist in the legislation. Let's say, for example, it is not going to be a surprise. Let's say in 2030, a law is enacted to say only a radiologist can actually certify somebody has got a particular thing, but it may also be mandated that an AI software further gives a second opinion. And that's actually the level of sophistication that we are actually getting there. If I just follow this with one more thing which was asked by Chandu, just following on Chandu. Evaluating the new technologies, one of the things that you need to do is to assess the problem it solves. If it doesn't solve a problem, but it's for the technology's sake, it doesn't make sense to follow that up, right? So we need to have very good clarity on the business case while evaluating new technology. Look for early adopters, and are they actually good organizations? Consider the ecosystem and infrastructure. Does it require a significant change in the hardware or infrastructure? The other thing that I would actually say is to evaluate the network effect. It's a very big topic, but the network effect, if you want to know more about it, search for NFX Network Bible. It talks about various type of network effects, which means if I have a customer who is actually also using it, the same technology or product, there is going to be a further use of that. There are different examples of that, whether the more the users, the more the buyers, the more the sellers. Amazon is an example. And you can also actually go to nfx.com to see that's one investment company that only invest in network effect creating company. And another one is the scalability and accessibility. Does this technology scale? Can it create this kind of a broad user base? And what kind of regulatory and monitoring mechanism is going to be there? Does the society accept this? In spite of all the technology hype, does it allow you to have a very good societal acceptance and follow the funding and talent? If the investors are following it, it is a good indication that this company has got a propensity to grow. And look at the consumer behavior and trends. Does it align with the customer behavior? That's another thing. So I will also be happy to go on to the detail of it, but you get a gist of how do you evaluate new technologies and watch for iterations and improvements, as I mentioned, and gauge the horizon. It may be too early to adopt. You can do also wait and watch.
Great. Now, to follow on this question, one of the key things in technology is also knowing when to pivot. We saw that Kodak didn't do it, Nokia didn't do it, but somebody like even Google didn't do it. But if you look at Microsoft, as you said, integrated OpenAI very fast. Now, what kind of framework, therefore, can businesses and professionals use? And especially when you look at the business model, because finally you have to follow the money, as you rightly said. What kind of framework can we use in order for us to evaluate, apart from evaluating the technologies, figure out when to pivot, when to change our business model? Because like we are seeing with SaaS companies, earlier print media companies who tried to go digital found that for 1 rupee in print media advertising, they were getting only 10 cents or 10 paise in digital advertising. SaaS companies are facing the same challenge when they move into an AI plus or an AI first model. How exactly can companies figure out a framework to successfully pivot?
It's another important question, right? So how do I know when to pivot? And there's no easy answer, but let me give a framework that I have been following. So identify the signals for change. It could be the customer behavior shifts. It could be emerging technologies create new opportunities. The competitors are gaining ground, and that's another way to look at it. Then you look at the 3 Ps. The 3 Ps stand for performance, pain, and potential. The performance stands for access if your current business model can still deliver results given the new technology landscape, or the customers having a pain that can be addressed by this new technology. Is there a potential opportunity for the technology to unlock new revenue stream? And the other one I would say is to embrace incremental shifts. Don't radically shift and stop what you are doing. Incrementally test it out and slowly pivot. In short, leaders need to think of their business models as temporary blueprints. So nothing is cast in stone. Be ready to tear it up when required, but do adoption in a slow fashion to be able to test this out.
In short, what you're talking about is creative destruction by internally itself instead of waiting for external forces to start destroying you. Anyway, we have some audience questions. I'll leave it to Ram to ask some of those questions. Hi. Yeah. Mahesh, your talk has generated a lot of interest, going by the number and the quality of questions. There are 581 people who are participating now online as we are talking. And I'll start with the question. This gentleman actually has 3 questions, but some of them I'll make it simpler for the sake of time. Mr. Jairaj, GM retired from SAIL. His first question is about what Stephen Hawking said. Success in creating AI would be the biggest event. Unfortunately, it might be the last unless we learn how to avoid the risk. What do you think about this? This is the first question. So I'll tell you one by one so it's easier to handle.
Sure. I think Stephen Hawking is a great person, and I think we need to respect what he says. Adoption of AI is actually a very interesting situation today. I think as we stand today, the AI that we know of is only at the cusp of growth. I think we have not actually seen the potential of the AI, but we are seeing a lot of funding going there, which means essentially there is not enough business case for many companies to shift to AI. And those who are making money in AI are more like the people who are actually selling the tools to do the gold digging. So the NVIDIAs of the world and the data centers of the world are starting to actually put a lot of efforts there. But the classic question here is it going to change potentially for the good, or is it going to be another one which we will actually find that it's going to disrupt a lot of things and create negative kind of economic impact? It's very difficult to say at the least, but I personally feel that it's for the greater good.
Thank you. Next is a very interesting question. The technologies like AI and blockchain require a lot of power. They are power guzzlers. On the one hand, we talk about carbon neutrality, and then we also are thinking that these will grow. How do you see the challenge being handled going forward?
That's another great question. I think it is actually a fact that for the amount of kind of power guzzling that happens today, I think the entire electric generation in US is not adequate, and the amount of fossil fuels it's going to burn is going to be phenomenal. Unless we come up with a fantastic disruption in the energy generation or in the algorithm that is being used to crunch the data that is being thrown at it, especially the GPUs, it is going to be a challenge. And I feel like as a collective responsibility, we have a problem there.
Yeah, Yuvraj of Chennai is asking what changes can we expect in the job market due to tech-driven automation? How should individuals and businesses get prepared for this?
Very good question. I think it's one of the important questions that we need to understand. And if some of you know, there is a book called What Do You Do When Machines Do Everything? If you haven't read it, have a look at it. And it's a very good point to understand what kind of jobs are going to be staying, what kind of jobs are going to be disrupted. Any desk job, any job that has actually required some amount of back office crunching, etc., is at risk. And it doesn't mean that a carpenter or a plumber is going to be left out. That's a different topic. But for those like accountants, for those like radiologists, for those who are actually writing stories in a film script, etc., are going to be disrupted in a big way. So what do? I need to actually understand how to use the tools that are actually available today to make myself productive. So I can become 10x productive by learning the skills that can actually give me. Otherwise, I'm going to be irrelevant. So it is better to come on the other side of the table and learn the skills, especially like the prompt engineering, or especially the skills that can help you to use the tool to make your work very productive. That's very, very important.
Mahesh, I think it's a good time for us to go into that question of what are the kind of skills and capabilities but both organizations and individuals need to develop. The technology literacy, for example, that we talked about.
Absolutely, Chandu. I think let me actually just talk about this appropriately. And I think building the future ready skills, one thing that we need to understand is it is very important for lifelong learning and adaptability. Constantly learn, constantly look at what actually the evolving strategies here, the ability to unlearn old methods and don't resist that I am actually been doing this like this and I am not going to be displaced. Nobody is going to be like that. So it's better to understand what can this tool help you with. Leaders should create a culture where experimentation is encouraged and failure is seen as a stepping stone, not a step back. I think digital fluency, Chandu was mentioning to me before, you don't need to code, but you need to understand enough to evaluate. It's like driving. You don't need to build a car or know the mechanism, but you need to know the basics of it. And I think that data literacy is a very important thing. Whatever job you do, the ability to collect, slice data, analyze, and gain insights is a very important skill. And then the agility in decision making, it's called the digital fluency, but not just the computer, but all kinds of technology. And then your ability to make decision and shorter decision cycles, not a very long one. Start small, iterate fast, and refine along the way. Think minimum viable product, as Chandu will say to a startup. Emotional intelligence and resilience is another important thing. And with disruption comes uncertainty. Leaders must build trust within teams and stay resilient. Human literacy, understanding how humans think and be able to make use of that is important. The future will be uncertain, but the ability to learn, adapt, and lead with empathy will always be in demand.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Mahesh. There's an interesting question from Archana from Bangalore. How do you think data privacy and security regulations would evolve in the coming years? What role do you think companies should play in safeguarding their user data?
Another important area, I think those who are actually familiar with Data Protection Act and different companies, different countries adopt different strategies. But India has taken a very interesting approach. Here we are actually going for a consent artifact. So rather than me saying I will put security and build a lot of security around my data, that's also important. But it's also important to say, how do I actually have the ability to give consent and revoke consent? One simpler example could be your account aggregator framework. Earlier, I need to give all my bank statements to a lender or to anyone who I need to. But now you don't have to do this. You have a framework called account aggregator. You give a consent and that consent can be revoked at your will, which means this is going to be a consent-based data privacy solution. So you are at control, you are at the middle of it. So you give control, you take control back. And that's the direction that the government wants to go.
Yeah, thank you. This is another very interesting question from Monish in Nungambakam. As an investor and mentor, what are some of the main challenges tech startups face when scaling up? What qualities do you look for in startups that aim for long-term impact?
Long-term?
Impact.
Chandu, I think as a great mentor and investor in startups, I will let you have the first level of answer.
I think some of the questions you already talked about, first and foremost, if you look at Steve Blank's definition of what a startup is, it's a temporary organization designed to look for a repeatable and scalable business model. So I think you have to answer the question of what exactly is the business model. It is how you create value, how you deliver value, and how you capture value. I think first those three foundational blocks need to be understood. Irrespective of whatever technology it is, finally it is about show me the money. Okay, so that's the first thing I need you to understand. That can you show me the way by which you'll create, deliver, and capture value? Which means you should know who you're making it for and what your purpose in making that is. The second we're talking about is a repeatable and scalable business model, which means it's not just one time. Okay, it also needs to be something that happens again and again. There's no point me buying once and then forgetting about it without me having a repeatable model in that sense. Scalable, because there's no point building something unless you're a Lamborghini which makes 200 cars but sells it for several crores, whatever. You're actually building something which has got a sizable market of some sort. So I think if these foundational blocks, irrespective of technology, are not understood, the startup doesn't have a chance in hell. Now the second thing is that particular product or offering unique? Is it differentiated? And is it something that existing or prospective customers will choose over existing alternatives? A lot of people don't take into account competitive landscape. Like you talked about Segway, very important. There are other methods of personal transportation. Segway somehow needed to develop an alternate, completely different ecosystem. And that's why you found that Segway, could not make it. In fact, very tragically, the Segway founder fell off a cliff riding a Segway. So it's that kind of tells you what happens, that when you go too much to the edge of the cliff with respect to technology. So I think we'll leave it at this for now, but I think that at least gives a basis for any startup to know what to do.
Absolutely.
There is another interesting question from Sweta in Chennai, which is about what role do you think technology innovations are playing in bridging the societal divides for healthcare, access to education, or financial inclusion? How does it help is the question.
Yeah, very important question. I think the end of all of this is how do we actually have a society which is inclusive and has a greater prosperity together, right? So the technology does actually play a very big role in making education, healthcare, and financial services affordable and reachable across people. For example, one of the companies that I'm involved in has got the financial inclusion across 30,000 villages in India. It is absolutely not possible unless we have the technology enabled for this. For example, the kind of infrastructure that we have in a country like India, I am proud to say that we are better showcase for the rest of the world to follow, whether it's the identity through the Aadhaar or it's the UPI for the money transfer at a very, very cost-effective manner. And if you take education, it is going to be possible. For example, a company called Vidyakul, it's not only focusing on the people who are going for IIT and IIMs, which is also important, but they are actually making it possible for them to learn from their mobile phone in their vernacular language, at their pace, at their home, which is very affordable. And these are examples of how education, financial services are making it possible to have an inclusive society. And I can give a lot more examples in healthcare, because technology makes things possible, affordable, because of the scale it actually creates, which was linked to the previous question. And that's a very important function of technology.
Thank you. This, I think you touched in your talk a little bit, but is there anything specific you want to say about this? With advancements in AI and biotechnology, what ethical considerations should entrepreneurs and investors keep on top of the mind? How can we ensure these innovations are used responsibly? This is from Arjun Pondicherry.
A very important question. So there is a paper on AI governance which you can actually read from ISACA. There are ISO papers and there are legislation in different countries at different stages. So what it actually talks about is actually about the consent, first of all, on the data that is being used for training. And if the data is being used for getting the training, it should not have any bias. For example, if it actually discriminate about any person on recruitment or actually on sanctioning loan, then it has to be identified and the data has to be corrected accordingly so that there is no discrimination on any of these functionality, whether it's by sex or by any other activity. And that's one of the basic premises, the data. The second one is actually about the privacy and the information flow, and that can be a larger topic. I talked about AI governance before. Please refer to the AI governance topic in ISACA. there is a lot of interesting information on that as well.
Thank you, Mahesh. One last question. This many people have asked. I'm just summarizing that. Is what do you think government will do in terms of regulations as well as any other policy for encouraging technology adoption, both going forward, especially in India, and maybe overseas also? If you know what people are doing, probably that will follow here.
That's actually a wider question. I think the government is actually trying to encourage the adoption of technology. For example, in India, MITI is the Department of Information Technology, which tries to provide access to technology for many organizations, not just the large organization, but also the small and medium organization. It also encourages any other technology that is being built by small and medium businesses to be provided to large firms, even like, for example, banks, for example, can use the startups technology without having to fulfill the criteria like a large balance sheet, etc. And the curriculum and the education should actually have more emphasis on how do you use technology. It doesn't have to be technical in nature, but the business benefits have to be propagated by the associations like what we are doing now, and also by many other organizations. So there's a lot to do, but we are doing and going in the right path.
Mahesh, I have a question which is for generally about India. Now, India, one of the sad things about India is that we don't really innovate. Our expenditure on R&D by companies is among the lowest. It's only when you're pushed to a corner that we really are forced to do something special. For example, space. There were sanctions on us, so we had to innovate, and therefore we see a lot of very interesting things happen in space, little bit in nuclear, because again, of the same reason. But left to ourselves, we missed the internet bus. We didn't really do anything much. A lot of telecommunications, we haven't innovated. And if you look at Gen AI again, right now, China has gone far ahead. It's number one in patents. It's several miles ahead of the US. It's got 30,000 patents out of the 50,000 in the world, with the US being second at 6,000 plus. India is barely got less than 1,000 or 1,200 in that case. Why is India repeatedly missing the technology bus? Why are we still consumers, not innovators and creators?
Yes, that's an interesting observation. I think when it comes to innovation, India has a very interesting take on this. This is my understanding. India is good at frugal innovation. That means, how do I actually innovate using very little resources? This is also because the kind of capital that is available for some of the Western countries, or some of the support that the government gives in certain countries like China, are not accessible to India. So what we end up doing is to be able to create innovation within the limited resources that we have, but the number of patents and the number of other kind of things that we can actually do can substantially increase, because we are not now actually filing for patents or actually doing the activities that are related to this, because the process is very cumbersome. I think the visibility of the innovation that is happening here is also not seen to the level, and hence the patents are not captured. The other activity that we tend to do is we like to provide services rather than products or platform. This is basically because it's easier to be able to bill, and we have actually grown like that in the early days of the IT growth. And I think now there is companies that are actually starting to do this, but it's a longer investment cycle. And hence, I think we need to have more risk capital to be able to support that.
Thank you, Mahesh. Thank you, Ram. I think we have had a very interesting discussion thanks to your active participation. I think we'll just quickly sum up. What we have heard from Mahesh is lots of great things are happening. Lots of innovations are happening. Lots of technology changes are happening. We have seen examples of great companies faltering. We have also seen examples of companies that are doing phenomenally well. And I think Mahesh has a couple of quick takeaways. So let's wait for him to give those quick takeaways, which is really, I think for India and for professionals like us, however smart we are, there is always somebody smarter, waiting and more hungrier. So we have always got to be understanding that, look, if we don't destroy ourselves first, there is somebody else outside waiting to eat our lunch. So whether you're a lion or a gazelle, when the sun comes up in the morning, you've got to start running. Otherwise, you will be lunch or you will have lunch. One of the two options. So I think with this small closing remark, let me hand it over back to Group Captain Vijay Kumar. Mahesh,
Thank
request
you
you
so
to
much.
join us.
Thank you so much.